The views expressed on this podcast are our own and do not constitute legal advice, nor do they constitute an attorney-client relationship. They also don't represent the views of anyone's employers. Hope you enjoy the podcast.
Ready to future-proof your business with data and AI? This is Trust with Dominique Shelton-Leipzig. Conversations about navigating the complex and evolving landscape of data protection, technology, and society. Here's Dominique.
Welcome back to my discussion with Dr. Suresh Venkatasubramanian. We are continuing our dialogue about his involvement in the White House AI Bill of Rights as a co-author of the document and the technical aspects of a trusted AI governance program. When I think about the proliferation of AI, we've got the business community, whether they are established public companies or startups, but the technology is moving so fast. How do we reach the student in the dorm room that is able to work with capabilities, AI capabilities at scale, practically at this juncture, and those impacts? How do you expect for some of these principles that we're talking about to just seep into the broader consciousness?
So I'm a professor at Brown, your university, your alma mater. And, as I'm sure you know, there are lots of students in their dorm rooms who are really concerned about these issues. And I think that's why they come to Brown in the first place, because they really are thinking about their role in society broadly. I mean, they're not just there to get a degree. They want more, right? So as an educator, I think I spend a lot of time talking to students who are pushing me to do more, to go further, to tell them more about what they can do to build more responsible tech. So I'm very excited about that. That's great. And that's Brown University in a nutshell, I think. So
yes.
Sounds familiar. So yeah. Very
familiar. I'm excited to hear that, but it doesn't surprise me with that.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah. You're an example of that, right? So that's one thing. Education is key at that end of it. But in terms of having these principles, as you say, percolate out into the broad, I think it's an all hands on deck effort, right? It's the efforts you're doing, reaching out to CEOs, board members, getting that level, the C-suite, understanding some of the concerns and issues and how this can be a strategic advantage to think about responsibility. I know you've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. I talk a lot to, computer scientists, to people working in these organizations in the trenches. Some of them graduate from college and, where they've heard from me and they're going out and doing that work. I talk to policymakers and emphasize the importance of creating incentives, whether legislative, regulatory incentives, to think more about this. I talk to the media. There's a lot of work going on to spread the efforts across the landscape, across everyone. And I think we're seeing that happen right now, right? I mean, for all its warts, I think ChatGPT and generative AI have help the population at large. I think people at large understand the breadth and reach of AI in our lives. And that's helpful. It keeps, it means that there are stories coming out regularly about these topics. There are it's in the front of their mind. It's in one way a good time to be talking about this, as you noted early on. But it's something that we all have to do together. I don't think it's just a bunch of academics or a bunch of researchers just talking. All of us have to, in our own way, understand how our responsibilities and our roles to build a better, trustworthy ecosystem for technology. And I think, as we've talked about before, different actors have different roles and abilities, and we all have to understand what our roles and responsibilities are and what we can do. I'm not going to go out and write a new software system in a company, but I can communicate what I think are the most important factors to consider, like the ones in the technical companion. And I know that there are very sharp developers at all of these companies who can pick up the guidelines in technical companion and, put them into more useful, actionable form, and then go out and implement them. And so we all have our roles to play.
I love this because it also puts the control about how this technology goes. And I often think about what we will think about this moment 10, 15, 20 years from now, and what each of us did at this time. Either keeping fingers crossed that everything will always go great and not looking at risk leads to a conveyor belt of potential problems, or seeing potential problems and not doing anything about it other than pointing them out, also sends us to the same conveyor belt of probably very avoidable outcomes. And so, one of the things I just digging in and unpacking just a little bit for our listeners, so I hope that this will incentivize them to take a look, because I'm not a technical person. I'm an attorney, but I could understand it when I read it. Some of the things when I read it that struck me would be great for businesses to know ahead of time is this concept of testing the AI before it's deployed, after it's in the wild, after it's deployed, to just ensure that it's still within the business parameters that the business is set for itself as far as accuracy, product safety, disproportionate impact, IP, privacy, cyber. In other words, if testing occurs and the AI is veering outside of those parameters, rather than wait to have it splashed on a headline, the company could learn in real time, the AI is going in a different direction, and the research team or the innovation team could go in and modulate the model in center with the brand. And I just thought that was such an interesting way of basically looking at problems, getting a real-time dashboard, and being able to nip what could be a huge thing in the bud from the get-go, because you're aware that, hey, things have gone a little off track. If you're not testing until you do it annually or biannually, there might be a whole lot of things that you don't want, inaccuracies, product safety issues that might have piled up that you could have easily nipped in the bud and protected the brand. So what are your reactions to that? What were you thinking when you guys, I'm looking at it with my legal lens and brand reputation and trust lens. And I'm curious what you were thinking about that.
Oh, I think the way you've described it is exactly right. I think, I'll be honest, that for me, testing is a no-brainer. It's a thing you have to do. It's just not even a question. And so putting it in the document was merely a way of saying, yeah, this is the most obvious thing you should do, and you should just do it. And I think of many of the provisions in the technical companion as those kinds of just, nah. But I think, to your point, right, the reason why it seems both an obvious thing to do, but also new thing to do, is I think because we've had this view of technology like, I don't know, Microsoft Word, right? Or other word processing, not to pick on Microsoft, any word processing.
Like you can't let maybe no companies.
Yeah. Word is fine. It's great. No problem with that. Some piece of software that you download, it's supposed to do a thing. It does the thing. That's it. Every now and then, maybe the company that makes it gives you an update, extra features, new colors, new themes. Great. But that's what it does its thing. And if you think of most software like that, like, okay, why do I have to keep monitoring it? Why do I have to keep testing it? It works. What's there to say? It did it. They did it. AI is not like that. Machine learning is not software in that sense of the word. The way we design ML systems, they are fragile. They are very dependent on how they're trained. They work differently out of context of where they were built. And the conditions under which they were evaluated to work well can change over time. It's not like word processing software. So if you buy, I'm not going to name a brand, I'll get into trouble again, but if you buy a car from a company that makes cars that are very solid and reliable and meant to just last, you might take it for a checkup once a year, once every 2 years. And, for a long time, it'll be just fine. But if you buy some very high performance car, with very, it can go really fast and do lots of crazy things, it tends to be much more finicky. And you have to know a lot about how to maintain it. Otherwise, its performance will drop dramatically. It'll be probably even worse than your old reliable car, unless you keep it very finely tuned. If you think of, AI versus a piece of word processing software, that's kind of the analogy. The system can do many things, but it is very, very heavily tuned and customized to work in certain conditions. And if you move it ever out of those conditions, or you don't keep maintaining it, you don't keep inspecting it regularly, it's going to fall apart and do worse than something else. We need to get used to the idea that while everyone is touting the benefits of AI, that does not come for free. You can't get the benefits of AI, but treat it like word processing software. You have to treat it like something that is a very, very finicky, delicate piece of software that has to be constantly supervised. And if you don't want that, that's fine. You don't have to use those systems if that's not, within your cost framework, if that's not something that you feel like you can invest the energy on. But don't expect that you can buy such a system or use such a system and not have to think about it all the time. That's all I think is the important point. You can get the benefits, but you have to put in the work and you have to realize that it's not something where you can just slot it in and be done with.
I think what you said is so important, Suresh, because I've been thinking a lot about these topics, as I know you have. And I'm looking at, without naming names, our most successful company in the globe, 3 trillion market cap. And I look at some of the capital investments that were made over a decade ago in things like privacy and cyber, and how that paid off for that particular super successful company was to be able to leverage, and going back to trust, being able to actually do commercials and put themselves out there in brand differentiating ways as a trusted technology partner. The other thing I was thinking about is, so you talked about the expense associated with monitoring and testing and being close to your AI as it develops and evolves, as the technology develops and evolves. But those are capital expenses. Do you think enough is said about the rewards of doing that? Do you think there would be any benefit in talking about some of the ways it can help the brand?
So I'm by as far from a business person as you can imagine. So I'm not sure how to talk about these things, but I do recognize that in a world where we want to quantify things carefully, we want to quantify costs and benefits. We're in a challenge where the costs are easy to quantify, but the benefits are a little harder to quantify in terms of brand reputation. And so I know it's possible to do it, but I know it's harder. Also, the timelines are different. The costs are paid now. These are investments. And the benefits, if at all, will come in the payoff will come in the future. And that's also, to some people, it seems like a bet. Maybe it'll come in the future. Maybe it won't. I don't know how to correctly. I think, people who work in business and in consulting probably know much more about how to do these estimations. But I will say this. Your example of privacy is a good one. I think, our concerns about, people who invested well in those sectors are benefiting from it now. And also, as a technologist, it's been really shocking to me to see how, in a span of almost like 2 years, the perception of the big tech companies has gone from amazing places, amazing creativity, to the source of all evil in the world, right? I'm exaggerating on both sides deliberately, but I think that change, and students coming and saying, I don't want to work at X big tech company, pick your name. I don't think they're a good member of society. I do not want to work there. That is shocking to me. I've never seen that happen. Things can change if you don't pay attention to what's happening and if you don't recognize your responsibility in this space. And it may not happen immediately. Maybe in the next 5 years you can get away with it, but you're not going to be able to get away with it for long, and these investments need to pay out. And I will say another thing. People in civil society are watching very carefully what these companies are doing. It's not like even 5-6 years ago when it was hard to get information. It was hard to understand what problems for people are facing with technology. It's hard to get the press to write about it. Today, if there's any problem with any piece of software that could impact people, there is someone who will write a story about this and talk about this and expose it to the world. We just heard about this case, for example, of this pregnant woman who was mistakenly arrested because a face matching her showed up in a facial recognition system. And she had nothing to do with this, but the system made a mistake.
This is an AI system?
Yeah, so an ML-based facial recognition system used by, I believe it was in Detroit, and it was part of a lineup, and then she was pulled out, and completely blamelessly. And this was within the New York Times in a week. The police station had to sort of issue statements and backtrack very quickly on what they were doing. And again, what I'm saying is that the cycle is a lot faster now than it used to be. And I think I would say if companies are worried about the investment now, I can say that if you don't do this now, these problems are going to be even bigger in 5 years and you won't be ready. And others who are will be.
That example that you provided, the machine learning being wrong and causing the woman to be selected in the lineup, I'm sure that company that helped create that AI system, working with others that helped install it, I'm sure that they did not want to be featured in the New York Times in that way about their product. And to your point about attention to these issues, it's sort of like the brand impacts that are all around us and are sort of hiding in plain sight. And the first time the CEO of the company might realize this is when it's on the headline and wondering what this could be a risk and what it can mean. So part of this discussion here that we're having around trust is to be able to help stimulate thought about what can be done. Sort of, I would say, I wouldn't call it a corporate clairvoyance, because there's actually research scientists such as yourself who have thought through ways to minimize these types of risks and try to elevate the technology to the point where it is. We really want to get to a point of, to my mind, the business interest in that instance, as well as the woman who was pregnant and what she went through, were actually aligned. Nobody wanted that situation. And I'm pretty sure that's not what the brand would have wanted. And I know that the woman probably would not want that at all. So what can we all do collectively? Encouraging the audience to take a look at the technical companion, because I thought there were some suggestions in there that might at least stimulate thought for your own environment. I'll just talk about how I got to know your technical companion to the AI Bill of Rights. And that was because we were all at Brown University at the Digital Trust Summit for CEOs and board members just in March. And you alluded to it in your statement, and I was so intrigued ever since. But how well do you think the technical companion to the AI Bill of Rights, how well do you think it's known to the business community? Let me just ask a different way. Do you get a lot of questions from business people to think about how they should operationalize AI?
So Twitter's 140 characters. The technical companion is 60 pages long, and the whole document is 73 pages. So no. What we should have done was make a TikTok about it. Then people will be paying more attention to it. I'm half joking.
You never know. Under the Brown students.
Yeah. Well, we couldn't have done a TikTok because we wouldn't have been at TikTok in particular.
Oh,
because,
right.
It would be something else, some other more palatable social media platform. But jokes aside, I think I'm very happy that you read the whole thing and that it made sense to you. That was the hope that would make sense. But it is dense, and that's why I wanted to pull out the broader themes that come through in it: issues of trust, issues of continuous monitoring, and issues of trust but verify, right? So this is the old, Cold War era sort of phrase, right? It's one thing to trust, but you don't just trust blindly. You trust through a process of verification and documentation and reporting and testing. And that's how, we think about it: trust but verify, right? So you want to build systems that are trustworthy. You should not trust that you know how to build them in a trustworthy way from day one. You should not trust that they will stay that way. And you should have lots of controls and signals and sensors around this very fragile system to continually monitor it. That is at some level essentially what the technical companion is saying. Now, there are specific issues. If you're doing, for example, bias mitigation or disparity assessments, there are certain things you should do. If you're looking at training machine learning algorithms, collecting lots of data, you should be looking very carefully at the quality of the data you're putting in various ways, making sure it's meaningful in different forms. And there's a whole bunch of requirements around that. So there's a lot of rich detail, I think, technically informed detail coming from research over the past decade or so on this topic goes into that. But at a high level, fundamentally, it's like build systems that you can inspect, analyze, query, and know what they're doing, and not just rely on a black box to do it for you. Be suspicious, be careful, and just probe them.
And I love what you're saying too. I think I would add one other sort of adjective there is being curious, and the ability to test, verify, have this healthy suspicion, all of the hope, but at the same time, the curiosity to be able to be continuously aware of how the AI is doing. One aspect of your technical companion, again, me not as a technical person, but I thought was really intriguing in that regard was the idea of these things being reflected in the technical documentation emanating from the AI system itself.
Yes.
Rather than hoping that you keep track of everybody's testing and you get everybody's notes in time, if it's embedded in the AI system itself, it seems like it's easier to alert the company that something's gone in a different direction and they need to go and adjust. You could see the mitigation efforts in the technical data. So A, it could be verified if there was a third party verifying, but B, for the folks who are working within the company, they can see what happened last time. I mean, I'm talking about the technical folks, can see what happened last time by just looking at the logging data.
Wait, are you sure you're not a computer scientist?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about this anyway. Did you get a secret degree at Brown? Okay, but what you said is very cool because it emphasizes a point that I would like to make. Right, 2 points: innovations and cost. So you mentioned this cost, right? The cost of doing this work, and it is a cost. But there's also a lot of innovation. Just the thing you described right now. Oh, can we embed some of this documentation inside the system itself? That's a nice idea. Maybe someone should try it. Maybe it won't quite work the way you thought. Maybe you have to adapt it. Maybe people will have to innovate on it. And I can guarantee you that once people start innovating, the costs will start coming down because people will figure out how to do this well. I mean, there's almost a truism in computer science, right? That the hard part is figuring out how to do something. And then you get a whole army of people who are very good at making it work faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And therefore cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So we just have to figure out how to start, how to get some of these ideas in play. And there's a ton of very creative people at companies who will find a way to make it cheaper and make it more effective without paying too much in terms of cost. But these innovations, like the ones you described, like others too, that's where we have to start. And this is why it sort of bothers me a little bit when people claim that building trustworthy systems is against innovation. It is in fact innovation. It is the right definition of innovation, coming up with cool new ideas to build systems that we can trust and rely on that do a good job for everyone.
And I will add another just amplification of your point there. I was reading a Forbes article that found that those companies that are trusted are 400% more likely to be successful. We're also in a situation where there was another Forbes article that talked about lack of trust in AI. And I'm shocked to see that on various very important verticals, the survey revealed a June article. We'll put all these links in the podcast notes, but that between 65% and 86% of people did not trust AI for some really key things, like their own jobs. 86% of people did not trust AI to do their jobs. 65% did not trust AI for medical purposes. Trusted companies do 400% better. And we're thinking our global economy is going to expand by $7 trillion in 10 years based on AI. But we have stats out here, like the survey that Forbes just ran in June, showing a significant lack of trust. It seems like we all need to roll up our sleeves to be successful and peer into resources such as your AI technical bill of rights and a continuing conversation around trust. So I'm excited to continue this dialogue. I hope we can have you back like later in the year, maybe in 2024, to just see how it's going and see if
hopefully it won't be depressing.
No, we're gonna. I think because of this conversation and which you exhorted us to at the beginning, sort of humans taking charge of this process and protecting our consumers, protecting our brands, protecting the integrity of the technology that we're going to need to rely on. I'm excited for where this goes, and thank you for helping this conversation go on. And of course, we'll continue it further too at the Digital Trust Summit in March 2024.
I'm very glad to speak with you. I'm glad we met at the Digital Summit the first time that you organized, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
This has been Trust with Dominique Shelton Leipzig. If you want to future-proof your business's investments in data and AI by adopting data leadership in privacy, security, and trusted AI legal frameworks, go to DominiqueSheltonLeipzig.com. Trust, Responsible AI, Innovation, and Data Leadership is a production of Forbes Books.